waters of the South China Sea have again become the stage for a dangerous and high-stakes confrontation, one that mixes legal claims, local livelihoods, strategic competition, and the hard logic of naval and Coast Guard operations. In the opening days of May, Philippine maritime patrols detected a Chinese oceanographic research vessel operating inside waters Manila regards as part of the country's exclusive economic zone, a ship identified as Xiang Yang Hong 33. Philippine aircraft and patrol vessels tracked its movements near Reed Bank and the reefs that ring it, and officials said the research ship was accompanied by Chinese Coast Guard escorts and a cluster of vessels believed to be part of China's maritime militia. Those observations set off a rapid exchange of accusations between Manila and Beijing and reopened questions about how contested seas will be managed when the interests of states, private companies, and local communities collide. Philippine authorities say the vessel appeared to be conducting hydrographic surveys and deploying service boats and survey equipment near Iroquois Reef, a feature close to Reed Bank that has long been thought to sit above significant oil and gas reserves. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the Philippines' own regulations, foreign marine scientific research inside a coastal state's exclusive economic zone requires explicit permission. Manila asserted no such authorization had been granted for this mission and described the activity as an unlawful intrusion into sovereign maritime rights. The Philippine Coast Guard documented the encounter, released flight logs and patrol reports, and made public images and video to buttress its diplomatic protest. Admiral Ronnie Gil Gavin, the commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, delivered one of the strongest public statements to emerge from Manila in recent weeks. He said, "We will continue to challenge any illegal activities that undermine our sovereignty and sovereign rights." That line captured the shift in style as much as the substance of Philippine policy. Under the current administration, Manila has been far more public and assertive in exposing incidents at sea, believing that transparency and international attention strengthen its legal and political position. Beijing, for its part, rejected those characterizations. Chinese officials labeled the mission legitimate marine ecological research and accused Philippine patrol aircraft of harassing the research vessel. China's Coast Guard warned Manila to stop what it described as inflammatory propaganda, insisting that the ship's activities complied with international law and reflected routine scientific work. Those competing narratives, one stressing sovereign rights and the other claiming peaceful research, are a familiar pattern in the South China Sea, where the same activity can be portrayed alternately as benign civilian science or as a strategic probe. What makes the CEF episodes especially sensitive is not only who is present at sea, but what they are doing. Hydrographic mapping and seabed surveys are not neutral data gathering exercises in an age when digital maps, undersea cables, and stealthy submarine operations are all integral to national power. Detailed bathymetric data informs navigation, undersea cable routing, and the placement of sensors or platforms. It can also be used to plan submarine operations and to support military logistics. For smaller coastal states like the Philippines, allowing unauthorized surveys inside the exclusive economic zone raises long-term strategic concerns. Data collected today can be used years from now to support operations that directly affect a country's security calculus. The legal backdrop to Manila's protest remains the 2016 arbitral award in The Hague, where a tribunal rejected the legal basis of China's expansive 9-gash line claim. The ruling affirmed much of the Philippines' maritime entitlements are one key features and waters. Beijing has consistently refused to accept that finding, insisting instead on historic rights and a different legal narrative. That unresolved legal dispute is the skeleton beneath every new incident. If law and fact have not settled who can do what where, then every survey, every patrol, and every fishing trip can become a political statement. The dispute is not solely about law or geopolitics. It is also intensely local. For coastal communities across the Philippines, especially those that depend on fishing, contested access to reefs and shoals translates into lost income, diminished food security, and daily confrontation at sea. Scarborough Shoal, in particular, remains a flashpoint. Since 2012, access to its rich fishing grounds has been effectively restricted, and Filipino fishermen repeatedly report harassment, dangerous maneuvers by other vessels, and barriers that obstruct traditional fishing routes. Recent reports about floating barriers near Ska Bro reignited local alarm, whether intended for navigation control, resource protection, or something else. Such obstructions have immediate human consequences for coastal communities. Manila's increasingly visible maritime strategy aims to protect those communities and to signal resolve. It is also part of a broader policy shift. Instead of confining sensitive interactions to closed diplomatic exchanges, the Philippines now releases imagery, footage, and patrol records to build international awareness and sympathy. The idea is to mobilize attention and to put pressure on Beijing by making otherwise technical encounters into matters of public record. All this plays out against a backdrop of deeper military realignment. The Marcos administration has deepened security ties with partners including the United States, Japan, Australia, and a range of European countries. Joint maritime patrols, anti-ship drills, and interoperability exercises have grown more frequent in Philippine waters facing the South China Sea. Officials in Manila argue that enhanced cooperation raises the strategic cost of coercive behavior and serves as a deterrent. Defense leaders have framed greater alliance activity as a necessary hedge against the asymmetry in capabilities between the Philippines and its larger neighbor. China views this trend very differently. Beijing contends that expanded multinational military presence near disputed waters exacerbates tensions and complicates bilateral dispute management. To be sure, China has continued to reinforce its own presence. More Coast Guard patrols, maritime militia deployments, and persistent activity around contested features. Satellite imagery and maritime monitors have documented Chinese construction patrol patterns and sustained operations near places such as Scarborough Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, and other reefs and shoals that anchor competing claims. One of the more difficult elements in the modern maritime contest is the blur line between civilian and paramilitary actors. China's maritime militia, often composed of ostensibly civilian fishing vessels coordinated with state agencies, creates ambiguity that complicates crisis management. When civilian-looking boats operate with state intent or support, other governments face hard choices how to respond without provoking escalation while still protecting fishing communities and asserting legal rights. That ambiguity increases the risk that a tense encounter will be misread and that a small collision or close quarters maneuver will bloom into political crisis. For its part, the Philippine government has argued that strengthening alliances and improving maritime capabilities are practical necessities. Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro has defended policies that deepen cooperation with partners and enhance the country's own sea domain awareness. Manila has sought better sensors, more capable patrol assets, and improved infrastructure on strategic islands and bases. Still, Manila faces internal constraints. Logistical and infrastructure shortfalls at key sites limit how quickly and effectively joint deployments can scale up. Those gaps underscore that deterrence is as much about hard logistics as it is about declarations or exercises. The region has not been without diplomatic engagement. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has emphasized openness to dialogue with Beijing, even as Manila pushes back publicly. At recent regional meetings in Cebu, Marcos proposed a regional maritime center within ASEAN to coordinate navigation, safety, maritime security, environmental protection, and crisis response. Supporters of a binding code of conduct argue that clearer rules and crisis management mechanisms could substantially reduce the risk of accidental escalation. Negotiations over a South China Sea Code of Conduct have dragged on for more than a decade. Progress has been fitful and incremental. The political challenge is large: how to reconcile the sex, how to reconcile the ACA, Strategic ambitions of major powers with the sovereignty claims and security needs of smaller coastal states. There are, however, narrower avenues for cooperation that could offer practical benefits. Manila has discussed the prospect of joint oil and gas exploration in contested waters, an idea driven by the pragmatic needs of energy security. China has indicated at times a willingness to talk about joint projects, though bilateral trust remains fragile. Environmental cooperation, coordinating on fisheries management, habitat protection, and pollution response is another area where mutual interests overlap. Yet even environmental collaboration is complicated by competing claims in the history of tension. Regional experts and diplomats continue to press for confidence-building measures, hotlines between coast guards and navies, agreed communication protocols for encounters at sea, joint search and rescue frameworks, and clearer rules for the use of maritime space. These proposals aim less at resolving sovereignty disputes than at reducing the likelihood that routine incidents lead to strategic miscalculation. In crowded sea lanes where naval vessels, Coast Guard cutters, maritime militia boats, and fishing fleets move within sight of each other, the capacity to communicate quickly and transparently can be the difference between a tense standoff and a manageable incident. There is also a growing recognition that the seabed itself has become a new front. Submarine cables, seabed resources, and undersea navigation channels are now implicated in both economic development and military planning. Hydrographic data, while vital to civilian navigation, carries dual-use implications when used for undersea warfare or infrastructure planning. That dual-use quality has made coastal states wary of allowing unauthorized survey activity within maritime zones they claim to control. For ordinary fishermen in the Philippines, however, these debates about maritime strategy and LEA doubly often feel remote. Their concerns are simple and concrete: safe passage to fishing grounds, uninterrupted livelihoods, and the preservation of marine ecosystems that sustain communities. Those human stakes have helped drive Manila's more visible posture at sea. Domestic political pressure to protect fishermen and coastal livelihoods shapes how the government chooses to confront or publicize maritime incidents. Outside powers have their own stakes. The South China Sea is one of the world's busiest commercial corridors, with trillions of dollars of trade passing through annually. Freedom of navigation is a global interest, and many countries have been careful to voice support for navigational rights while avoiding steps that might escalate tensions. The United States, for example, has repeatedly reaffirmed defense commitments to the Philippines under a bilateral mutual defense treaty, while simultaneously trying to calibrate its military presence so that deterrence does not slide into provocation. Japan, Australia, India, and several European states similarly balance public statements about law and stability with careful operational choices. As the confrontation over the research vessel demonstrates, today's incidents can rapidly become tomorrow's diplomatic crises. The risk of miscalculation is high precisely because the operating environment is so complex. Multiple actors, overlapping claims, and a mix of civilian and state-directed vessels create fertile ground for misunderstanding. That danger makes efforts to institutionalize crisis management and to forge clearer rules of the road in contested waters not merely desirable but essential. For now, Manila has said it will continue to defend what it regards as lawful maritime rights under international law. Beijing has signaled equal determination to assert a broader interpretation of historic rights. Diplomatic channels remain open, but trust is limited, and progress toward a binding regional code of conduct remains slow. Whether that code and the smaller confidence-building measures can be agreed in time to prevent a single maritime incident from escalating into a broader confrontation is an open and urgent question. What is clear is that the strategic, economic, and environmental stakes of the South China Sea will keep drawing attention from capitals in the region and beyond. How those actors manage competition, protect livelihoods, and reduce the risks of miscalculation will determine whether this vital waterway remains a zone of managed rivalry or slides into recurrent crises. In the weeks and months ahead, naval movements, Coast Guard patrols, diplomatic notes, and the daily work of fishermen will all matter. matter, not just for the nations involved, but for the security of trade, the health of marine ecosystems, and the fragile balance of peace in one of the world's most consequential maritime theaters.